Pranayama and Pratyahara, two big Sanskrit words that really just mean breath and attention, which is already a big part of what we do in yoga. Welcome to part 2 of Weaving the Limbs of Yoga into Any Class. In this episode, you'll learn simple, practical ways to weave in the 4th and 5th limbs of yoga. No Sanskrit required, so you can feel more confident and offer your students a deeper experience. So let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been teaching, practicing, and loving yoga for nearly 30 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Youthful Older Yogi. I'm MJ Waddell, the creator and founder of Share Yoga, and your host for this podcast. This is part 2 of weaving the limbs of yoga into any class. Since there are 8 limbs, I couldn't do them all in one episode. So if you missed the first episode, go back to episode number 61, which is also entitled Weaving the Limbs of Yoga into Any Class, Part 1. And this is Part 2. And today we're going to be talking about the next 2 limbs. So I'm skipping, last episode we did the yamas and niyamas. And that's how we relate to others and how we relate to ourselves. And the 3rd limb is asana. And I'm going to, for now, skip over the 3rd limb, the physical postures, because for most of us, we already teach this, and it's what our students come for, and it's deeply woven into the practice. So instead of spending time there, I'm moving forward into the next 2 limbs, limb 4 and 5, not always explored. And the first is pranayama. So pranayama is the 4th limb. And many of us already cue pranayama into our classes. It's our breathing practices. And yoga without breath really, I have never really been to a class where they've never once mentioned breath. So many of us already cue the breath and mention breath in class, but actually sometimes teaching the pranayama and the breathing practices, it can just be a little bit intimidating, especially if you're just starting out. And sometimes I know for myself, we may think that if we start or stop or end a class with a breathing practice, that our students might feel they might lose interest, that it feels too quiet, or even that they're not doing it right. And you could be feeling this yourself, actually. So one thing I always recommend is practice it first before you offer it into your class. Practice cueing out loud. It's like just practicing a script, because the more familiar you become with it, the more naturally and confidently you'll be able to share it. And just as importantly as sharing it with others, it's going to benefit yourself. And that changes how you teach. So the pranayama, it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be complicated. Even 1 to 2 minutes of simply paying attention to the breath can begin to shift the nervous system and steady the mind. And that's what we're there to help our students do and help ourselves do. So we can start small. You can start at the beginning of class, between poses, or at the end of class. And so I'm going to focus on 2 breathing techniques in this episode, the ujjayi breath and box breathing. So ujjayi has there's a few different translations for it. You may have heard it described as, or translated into victorious breath. It does mean to become victorious or to gain mastery. And another translation is to clear the throat and master the chest area. So it's that breath with sound while we gently constrict our throat. Sometimes I teach it a couple different ways. You can ask your students to say the word whisper and then prolong the purr at the purr sound at the end. So whisper. So you're making this little hissing, that little sound. That's the ujjayi breath right there. The sound of it. Whisper, whisper. I hope you can hear that coming across. on this Zoom. Um, but so that's one way you can introduce it to your students. The other way I usually introduce it is to have them just with an open mouth gently say the word ha, or breathe the word ha. So if you can't hear this on Zoom, you're just opening your mouth, saying the word ha. It's like you're just exhaling the word ha. And then you inhale the word ah. So you're breathing the air in and out through the mouth to start with, and they can connect with the sound of it. And then after 3 or 4 open mouth breathing like that, then you gently close the lips and you continually mentally to yourself say the word ah on the inhale and ha on the exhale. So this is the start of introducing this pranayama technique. So I'd like to try this together, practicing just 5 ujjayi breaths, 5 inhales, 5 exhales. That's about a minute, maybe a little bit more. And before we start to practice, you just want to allow the breath to be steady and calm. There's just little sound in the back of your throat, and it's just like a gentle ocean wave coming and going. So let's try that together. So wherever you are and you're breathing, gently exhale. And then with gently closed lips, inhale the word ah. Exhale the word ha. And you're just mentally saying it to yourselves. Inhale the word ah. Exhale the word ha. Inhale the word ah. Exhale the word ha. Inhale the word ah. Exhale the word ha. So that's just maybe about a minute of practice, depending on the length of your inhales and your exhales. What you want to encourage your students and yourself to do is just to stay calm and breathe gently, steadily. If you feel any type of anxiousness arising, just back away from it and breathe naturally. It's a practice and it won't automatically become natural, but after you do it, I would say consistently for a month or two, you'll be able to just dip and enter right into it at any time. So that is the ujjayi breath. And those are just simple ways, and you can just take a minute, or if you don't want to introduce the ujjayi breath or the box breathing or any type of a practice, you could just encourage your students or yourself to sit for 1 minute and just notice your breath. Watch, follow, and experience your inhale. Watch, follow, and experience your exhale. And just as best you can, try to have your mind stay steady and present on the breath. Just 1 minute. And the reason for the ujjayi breath is when you have that anchor of sound to focus on, it leads into the next limb that we're going to talk about. But it also is teaching you practice and focus and attention. So that's a few different ways you can introduce breath into your teaching. Also, you could also do it in the midst of class after maybe you've done a flow or 3 or 4 flows. You could pause for a minute and do the same thing. Let's pause for a minute and just bring the attention back to the breath. Simple, easy. Okay, so let's talk about the box breath. So the box breath, if you think about a box, there's four sides to the box, equal sides, like a square. So you're going to inhale for a count of, in this episode, we'll do for a count of 4, but it could be for a count of 3, it could be for a count of 5, 6, whatever you want to choose. I think 4 is a nice place to start for people that have never done it. And it's their count of 4, not your count of 4. You might cue it a couple rounds, and then you let them go on their own. So it would be inhale for a count of 4, pause, pause your breath for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and pause for a count of 4. Some people say inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4. I like to use the word pause. Sometimes when you say the word holding, I know for me, it felt like I was tensing up and more determined to hold on to something than to grip. A pause is just like, it's just a pause without any tension. So this is a repeated cycle. Again, you could do maybe four to 5 rounds. That's about a minute, maybe a little bit more. And you want to encourage them to breathe gently without any amount of strain. And if the 4 count is too long, or whatever count you offer is too long, then they can just make it shorter. And the same for the pause. They can make the pause shorter. So let's go ahead and try this together. Wherever you are in your breathing cycle, just go ahead and exhale. And now inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3. On your own, 2 more cycles. Good. And then allow your breath just to return to its natural cycles, your natural way of breathing. So it's a nice experiment for your students and for yourself to notice the inhales, the pauses, the exhales, the pauses. Where's your counting? Could it have been longer? Could it have been shorter? There's no right or wrong answer to it. It's just really you can determine the rate of your inhales and exhales and pauses based on your experience or where you are. It could be the time of day. It could be whatever situation you're in. So this is it's just very interesting to notice that when we focus on the breath, interesting things begin to happen and our attention begins to turn inward. And so that brings us to the next limb, Pratyahara. But before we move into the next limb, I just want to pause for a moment. This is the ideal spot it's a natural pause, not disruptive. And just before we move on, I just want to briefly share something I'm quite excited about. I'll be hosting my second Nurture and Nourish retreat in 2026 on beautiful Bald Head Island in North Carolina. The retreat is designed especially for those of us that are in prime time of life. So I would say, over 50, 45, over 50, and it focuses on movement, mindfulness, and connection to nature in a very supportive and nourishing environment. It's like if you were to characterize this retreat, it's really, there'll be nothing on your to-do list except to be taken care of. So if that speaks to you, you can find all of the details on my website, shareyogawithmj.com, shareyogawithmj.com. And now let's get back to Pratyahara. So Pratyahara is the 5th limb of the 8 limbs. And I know that limb can feel a little bit abstract, and it has to do with the senses and gently withdrawing our attention away from all the things that constantly are pulling at us, which is basically everything. So a simple way to understand this is think of a time when you were completely absorbed in something. Maybe you felt like you were in the zone. That's a little bit of a glimpse of Pratyahara. You might even have felt this during the breathing practices if you practiced along. So, moments when your attention was completely on the breath and your mind was not pulled away with something else. So, how do we introduce this in class? Well, you can use simple technique just by closing the eyes. So you close the eyes and you're closing away the sense of sight, right? And you can focus on your breath sensations like we just did. And you can frame it as sense rest, quote unquote, sense rest, by consciously directing your awareness into the body. So that can happen during Savasana or slow, mindful poses. So easy cues like stay with the breath. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back. Allow your breath to be the anchor. Just a few things that you might say. So really that's it. You're already teaching Pratyahara, and it isn't like zoning out. It's actually a very aware state. Your senses are still there, but they're just not pulling you in every direction. So again, you don't ever have to announce the limbs. If you're guiding attention, you're already inviting awareness and you're already teaching yoga. And so that's really the next two limbs, pranayama and pratyahara. Don't be afraid of them like I have been for several decades. I'm not afraid of them anymore because really we are already teaching it. We just haven't been mentioning it. So thank you for listening. And in the next episode, part 3, I'll explore the final 3 limbs, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, and how those can be introduced in simple, accessible ways. And I must tell you that episode 3 is going to be quite challenging to me because I don't believe I've ever introduced samadhi in my classes at all. That's translated as enlightenment because, that's who basically reaches enlightenment. I'm not quite sure about that. So this will be an interesting episode for me to create and to help myself teaching and also help you in your teaching. So until then, just keep it simple. Keep weaving and sharing yoga. You're already doing it. And I'm so grateful that you are here and listening. I appreciate any likes, any comments, anything at all. So thank you again. And visit my website, shareyogawithmj.com. And until next time, keep sharing yoga. Namaste. Thank you so much for listening. Now you can go to my show notes on YouTube or Buzzsprout and send me a voicemail or email. I'd love to hear what topics you'd like me to speak about, what your thoughts are on the episodes, and maybe I'll share your message on a future episode. Please subscribe to my website, shareyogawithmj.com, so you can receive my newsletters and be first to know about my retreats, workshops, courses, and freebies. If you navigate on social media, you can find me mostly on Facebook and a bit on Instagram at Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne. This podcast would not be possible without the help of my editor, Dan Jones from Cocoa Beach Productions. You can find Dan at cocoabeachweb.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who share their time, insights, and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well, stay youthful, and keep sharing yoga.